At 11:40 at night, Route 70 had turned to black glass. Rain came down in sheets thick enough to swallow headlights whole.
Help me!
At mile
Please
47,
help!
where the truck stop lot met the on-ramp, a single motorcycle sat dead in the right lane, and a small boy in an olive poncho was running toward it. His name was Isaiah Booker. Everyone at the lot called him Zay. He was 11 years old, and he had spent the last 3 hours doing the only job he had: watching parked bikes so their owners could eat inside without worrying. $1 a bike, sometimes $2. The stalled rider was still in the saddle, boots down, hauling at the handlebars. His back tire would not turn. A heavy cruiser with a dead chain is 900 pounds of anchor, and semis were coming off the ramp behind him at 50 in the dark. Zay did not think about whether it was his business. He grabbed the reflective flag he used for backing bikes in and out, planted himself 20 feet up lane of the rider, and waved it in big, high arcs, exactly as his mother had drilled into him. Make them see you first, then trust them to stop. Before we go further, tell me what time it is where you are, and what road you can hear from your window right now. If you believe a decent kid can still change a hard man's whole life on a rainy night, stay with this one. Because a 60-cent chain link and one hair tie were about to bring 200 engines back to mile 47. The rider's name was Marcus Ellison. The Iron Wolves called him Boone. He was 46, road captain, and 6 weeks out from a wreck that had left his right knee in a brace he could barely bend. He could not push the bike. He could barely stand off it. A pair of headlights swung wide around him, horn blaring, spray washing over both of them. Boone flinched. The boy did not. Zay just kept the flag moving, side to side, steady, his eyes locked on the ramp so he could read the next truck before it read them. "Kid!" Boone shouted over the rain. "Get off the road!" Zay shouted back without turning. "You get off the road, mister. I got the traffic. You can't run. I can." It was not brave talk. It was math. And the boy had already done it. Boone looked at him then. Really looked. At a soaked 11-year-old standing between a stranger and a wall of oncoming trucks, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. In 30 years of riding, Boone had never once been the one who needed saving. Behind the fuel island, a man in a rubber apron watched from under the awning and did nothing. That was Dale Rooker, who ran the truck wash concession. He cupped his hands and yelled, "Hey, get that kid out of the lane before he causes a wreck," and stayed exactly where he was, dry. Zay ignored him. He walked the flag back to Boone at a crouch, keeping low and visible, and got his shoulder against the frame. "Neutral," he said. "Kill the brake. When I count, we roll it to the shoulder. Downhill's that way. You steer, I flag." Boone stared. "You've done this before." "Every night," Zay said. They went on 3. Zay's sneakers slid on the wet asphalt, poncho plastered to his ribs, but he kept the flag up in one hand and his shoulder in the frame with the other. And the dead bike crept, groaning, out of the lane and onto the gravel shoulder. A truck blew past the spot where they had been standing 4 seconds earlier. The wind of it staggered the boy. Boone caught his arm without thinking, and for a moment the two of them just stood in the rain, breathing, the cruiser ticking as it cooled. "You're bleeding?" Boone said. Zay looked at his own palm, at the long scrape from the frame bolt, and shrugged like it was someone else's hand. "It's fine. Your chain snapped. Master link blew. I saw it whip when you came off the ramp." He crouched by the rear sprocket. "Yeah, there it is." Boone leaned over, knee brace creaking, and looked where the boy was pointing. The drive chain hung loose and greasy off the sprocket. One link burst clean open, the 2 ends dangling in the rain. On a night like this, in a town like this, that was the end of the ride. "I got no spare link," Boone said. "Shop's closed. Tow won't come out in this till morning." He said it flat, in the clipped voice proud men keep for things they hate to admit. Zay was not listening. The boy had gone still, staring at the broken chain. And then he looked down at his own wrist. Around Zay's left wrist, stretched and faded, was a lavender elastic hair tie with a tiny brass bird charm threaded onto it. He wore it every day. His mother wore its twin. Her rule was simple. You keep something of mine on you, so I always know where you are. Zay peeled it off his wrist. Boone frowned. What's that going to do? Hold the ends, Zay said. Not to ride hard, just to walk it. If we splice the chain back over the sprocket and cinch it, it won't drive. But the wheel will roll free without the chain fouling it. We push it to the wash bay out of the rain. He knelt in the gravel, poncho pooling water, and threaded the burst chain back around the teeth of the sprocket by feel, fingers black with grease inside a minute. The rain made every link slick. He worked slowly, tongue between his teeth, careful as a boy who had already learned that a slip here costs you blood. The little brass bird caught a stray shine of light as he looped the elastic through the open link and around the pin. Once, twice, 3 times, cinching the broken ends together snug against the sprocket housing so nothing could swing loose into the spokes. That won't hold weight, Boone said. It's not supposed to, Zay answered, not looking up. It holds the chain still. You keep it in neutral, I push, you steer. Same as before. 40 feet to the bay. He sat back on his heels, checked his own knot and nodded once, satisfied. Okay, try the wheel. Boone rocked the bike. The rear wheel turned free and clean, the bound chain riding quiet against the housing instead of jamming. The road captain of the Iron Wolves looked at a hair tie doing the job of a $50 master link, tied by a boy who should have been asleep hours ago. They walked it in together, the boy's shoulder in the frame, Boone limping alongside on the brace, and rolled the dead cruiser under the truck wash awning and out of the storm. Zay set the side stand himself, careful of the paint, and finally wiped his ruined hand on his soaked jeans. What's your name? Boone said. It was not a question. Zay. Zay, what? Booker. The boy picked his tally notebook up off the ground where he dropped it, checked that the pages weren't too wet, and tucked it back inside the poncho. You want me to watch it till your shop opens? $1 a night. I'll cover it. Boone laughed, short and rough, because the kid who just risked his life for free was now, very seriously, quoting him a rate. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I want you to watch it. He reached for his wallet, and that was the moment Dale Rooker came around the corner of the bay, squeegee in hand, loud. There he is, Dale said, jabbing the squeegee toward Zay. I've been watching this one all night, circling the bikes, pawing at him. Now look, he's got his hands all in your machine, mister, and I'd check your bags if I were you, because these kids don't hang around a lot like this for their health. Zay went very still. He had heard this before, in this exact shape, and he knew there was nothing he could say that would sound like anything but guilt to a man who had already decided. So he said nothing. He just held his greasy hands out, open, and let them be seen. He fixed my chain, Boone said. His voice had dropped low. He flagged me out of a live lane. What did you do, Dale? Stand under your roof and yell? Dale's face went tight. I keep this lot honest. That's my job. Funny, Boone said, because I count 6 bikes here, and the only hand I've seen near a wallet is yours. Up on the corner of the wash bay, unnoticed by all 3 of them. A cheap weatherproof camera blinked its little red light down at the tip jar Dale kept on the ledge. The one where riders dropped Zay's dollars. The one Dale emptied at the end of every night and never once split. You calling me a thief? Dale said. Boone stepped in close, brace and all. I'm saying a kid just did your whole town a kindness in the rain, and your first move was to call him a criminal. So no, I'm not calling you a thief yet. But I'm about to start asking questions. Rain hammered the metal roof above them. Zay looked between the two men, and then he did the thing that broke Boone's heart a little, though the road captain would not have those words for it until later. The boy took one slow step back toward the dark, toward the edge of the light, a small retreat every kid learns once adults start raising their voices about him. "Stay," Boone said. "Just that." The boy stopped. "You didn't do anything wrong, so you stay right there and you don't move and nobody touches you." Boone pulled his phone out of his vest, thumbed it, and said, "I'm calling my club, and I'm calling the sheriff, and we're going to let a camera decide who the thief is." It took 20 minutes for the first headlights to come off the ramp, and then more behind them, and more, until the truck stop lot at mile 47 glowed with idling engines, and the rain turned gold in the beams. The Iron Wolves had come out into a storm for one of their own. At the front rode a big man with a gray beard and dark shades pushed up on his soaked head. Reaper Ray Calder, 58, President. He killed his engine, and one by one the rest went quiet behind him, until the only sound left was rain and the low idle of Boone's dead bike waiting under the awning. Ray walked over to Boone first, because that was the order of things. "You hurt?" "No." "The bike?" "Chain blew on the ramp. I was stuck in the live lane." Ray's jaw worked. "In this, you should have called sooner." "I didn't have to," Boone said. "A kid pulled me out." Ray turned and looked at the boy for the first time. Zay stood exactly where Boone had told him to stand, soaked to the bone, hands still black with grease, small under the big man's shadow. Behind Ray, a mountain of a man named Tank folded his scarred arms and studied the scene without a word. "This is the thief?" Ray said, not unkindly, just testing the air. Dale jumped in fast. He was all over the bikes. "I run the wash here, I see everything. And I'm telling you, these kids come around at night and they—" "I didn't ask you," Ray said, without turning his head. Dale's mouth closed. Ray crouched down, slow, knees popping, until he was closer to level with the boy. He did not reach for him. He just got low, the way you get low for a spooked dog or a scared kid. And he let the boy see his face instead of the underside of his beard. "You got a name, son?" "Beeks Zay Booker." "Zay, I'm Ray. That's my road captain you helped." Ray glanced at the bound chain, at the little brass charm cinched into the greasy links, and something crossed his face and left again. "That your fix?" "Yes, sir." "Show me what you used." Zay held up his bare wrist, then pointed. "My mom's hair tie." For a long second, Ray said nothing. He looked at the hair tie holding a 900-pound machine's chain out of a boy's spokes. And he looked at the boy who'd given up the thing off his own wrist to help a man he'd never met. And the president of the Iron Wolves felt the old ache he carried turn over in his chest. "Dale," Ray said, standing back up. "You said my captain should check his bags." "I did. I said, Boone, check your bags," out loud, on his phone. Boone was already filming. He flipped his saddlebags open, one at a time, and counted his cash into the camera, bill by bill, rainwater dripping off the leather. 420, Boone said. All of it, nothing missing, nothing touched. He turned the phone toward Dale. "The boy had his hands in my chain, not my bags. And you've been standing dry under a roof this whole time, telling everybody what you saw. So tell me again. What did you see?" Dale's eyes went to the little camera on the corner of the bay. Just for a second. Just long enough. Ray caught it, because catching things like that had kept Ray alive for 30 years. And the president turned his head and followed the man's glance up to the blinking red light aimed at the tip jar. "That camera yours, Dale, or the lot's?" Ray asked. "The lot's," Dale said, too quick. Then the lot's got footage, Ray said. Of everything. Of the boy. Of the bikes. Of that jar. He let it sit. You still want to file a complaint about a thief tonight? Because I'd love to watch the tape with the sheriff. Rain filled the silence. Somewhere in the ring of headlights, an engine ticked. Dale opened his mouth, closed it, and said, smaller now, I don't want any trouble. Nobody ever does, Ray said. Doc. He raised his voice. The kid's bleeding. Come look at his hand before we do anything else. Doc Withers came out of the pack, 66, tan field jacket, wolf-marked box under his arm. He knelt in front of Zay without ceremony, took the scraped hand in his, turned it to the light, and grunted. Frame bolt? Yes, sir. Deep, not stitches deep. You always work with your hands this cut up? Zay looked at the ground. It's fine. It's not fine, Doc said, but gently, cleaning the scrape while the boy held still. Kid your age is home in bed on a school night. What are you doing out here at midnight in a storm, watching bikes for dollars? And Zay, who had answered every hard question so far, did not answer that one. He looked at his shoes. Ray watched the boy not answer, and the not answering told him more than any answer could. He crouched again, one knee in the wet gravel, and asked it the only way that ever works, which is quiet and without a trap in it. Zay, who are you watching these bikes for? Zay held out for a moment more. Then, in the ring of 24 idling engines and rain, the boy said it plain, almost light, giving the biggest thing in his life the tossed-off delivery kids reserve for what they can't afford to let weigh much. My mom, she's got a bad heart. The pills are $200 a month and the card only covers half. Nobody moved. She's a homemade, Zay went on, because now that it was out, it kept coming. Nights, mostly. She sits with old folks so they don't fall. But her own heart's the sick one, and if she misses the pills, she gets dizzy. And if she gets dizzy, she can't work, and if she can't work... He stopped. So I watch bikes. Doc looked up sharply at the words bad heart. What'd she take? You know the name? Zay dug in his poncho, pulled out the tally notebook, and opened it to a page near the back, where a folded pharmacy slip was tucked into the spine, soft from being handled. He didn't read it out. He just turned it so Doc could see. Doc read the slip, and his mouth went to a thin line, and he passed it up to Ray without a word. Ray looked at it, at the drug name, at the boy's careful column of dollar signs and tally marks on the facing page. $3, 2, 1, 1, 5 on a good night. Adding up to a child's whole idea of saving his mother. How long you been doing this? Ray asked. Since spring. By yourself. Nobody else was going to. The boy said it without heat, without blame, just as a fact about the shape of his life. She thinks I'm at my cousin's. I'm home before she's off. She can't know. She'd make me stop, and then who buys the pills? Tank, who had not said one word this whole time, turned his big head away and looked hard out into the rain like a man who'd gotten something in his eye. Boone put his back against his dead bike and slid down it until he was sitting in the gravel, level with the boy, brace out straight. Come here, Boone said. Zay came. You know what you did on that ramp tonight? Flagged you out. You saved my life. I want you to hear me say the words, because a lot of people are going to spend the next hour talking about you like you're a problem, and I need you to know the truth first. You saved my life. With a hair tie and a flag. Ray crouched back down and then held the folded pharmacy slip out to the boy, who took it and tucked it away, like the treasure it was. Zay, I'm going to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. Does your mother know how bad the money is? The real bad, not the making it work bad. Zay was quiet. Then, no. She'd worry. Worrying's bad for her heart. So you carry it, Ray said. The whole thing, at 11. Somebody's got to. Ray nodded slowly and stood. And when he spoke again, his voice had gone rough at the edges. Doc, I want you to look at that slip and tell me what she really needs. Boone, you still owe this kid a ride you can't pay tonight. Remember that. Everybody remember that. A ride? Zay looked up. Ray managed half a smile. You rolled my captain to safety on your mother's hair tie. That's a debt. The Iron Wolves keep debts. I don't know when and I don't know how. But this club owes you a ride, son, and we don't forget the ones we owe. He said it like a vow, because it was one. Like the boy did not understand yet what those words would come to mean on a worse night than this one. He just nodded, because a grown man had made him a promise and looked him in the eye, doing it. And that alone was rare enough in Zay's world to be worth writing in the notebook. Doc stood, pocketing the slip after copying the drug name onto his own hand in pen. I know a cardiac clinic off exit 41 that runs a sliding scale. And I know the pharmacist there. First thing tomorrow, I'm making a call. He looked at Ray. But that's her medicine. Right now, this kid needs to be dry, fed, and off this lot. Dottie's, Ray said. It's the only warm room within 10 miles, and she's still got the light on. He looked down at Zay. You hungry? The boy hesitated, and the hesitation was its own answer, and Ray's jaw tightened again. Right. Bike stay here, Tank sits with them. The rest of us are going to go sit in a warm booth and figure this out like people. Before anyone rolled anywhere, a set of red and blue lights turned in off the highway and splashed color across the flooded lot. Deputy Marla Kenner, 47 night shift, stepped out under a wide hat with the rain drumming off it and her body cam already blinking on her chest. Boone had made 2 calls. This was the second one. Somebody reported a theft, Kenner said, reading faces. Who's the complainant? Nobody spoke for a beat. Then Dale, cornered, said, I called it in. The kid was interfering with a customer's motorcycle. Kenner looked at the soaked boy, at the ring of bikers standing quietly around him like a fence, and said carefully, Interfering how? He fixed the chain, Boone said. I'm the customer. I don't want to press anything except a thank you. Kenner's eyebrows went up. Then where's the theft? There isn't one, Ray said. But there's a camera on that bay, deputy, aimed right at a tip jar. And I think if you pull the footage, you'll find the only hand in that jar all week belongs to the man who called you. Dale started talking fast, about kids and lots and how you can't be too careful. And the more he talked, the quieter everyone else got. Until his own words were the loudest thing in the rain, and he could hear how they sounded. Kenner let him run out. Then she walked to the bay, tilted her head up at the little camera, and keyed her radio. Zay, she said, coming back, crouching to his level, mirroring the move Ray had made an hour before. I'm Deputy Kenner. Can you show me the hair tie you used? Zay pointed at the chain. Kenner leaned in with her flashlight, and the beam found the little brass bird cinched into the greasy links, and then she moved the light to the boy's bare wrist, where a matching pale band had left its mark on his skin. That's your mom's, Kenner said. It was not a question. She's got the other one, Zay said, so she always knows where I am. Kenner was quiet for a second. She had a boy of her own at home. Okay, she said, standing. Here's what's going to happen, and I want everyone to hear it so there's no confusion later. The footage from that camera is evidence now, and I'm going to pull it, Kenner said. If it shows this boy stealing, we'll deal with that. If it shows something else, we'll deal with that too. Nobody touches the jar. Nobody touches the camera. And nobody, she looked at Dale, leaves the lot until I've seen the tape. It took the lot manager, a tired man named Pell, 20 minutes to drive out and log into the little cameras app on his phone. He scrubbed back through the night with Kenner reading over his shoulder, the body cam catching all of it. The bikers waited in the rain. Zay stood between Boone and Ray and watched the two men's faces instead of the screen. They watched the boy back 3 bikes in and wave 2 riders out. They watched him flag traffic around a broken-down sedan an hour before Boone even arrived. And then they watched, at 11:04, Dale Rooker walk to the ledge, look both ways, and lift a fat handful of bills out of the tip jar and fold them into his cash belt. Pell lowered the phone. He looked at Dale, and then he looked at the ring of iron wolves, and then he looked at the 11-year-old he'd been about to have trespassed off the property, and something in the manager's face came apart. "Dale," he said quietly, "that's the boy's jar. That's the rider's dollars for the boy." Dale said nothing. "You accused a child of stealing," Kenner said, "to cover yourself stealing from a child." She was writing now, rain spotting her notepad. "That's a report I'll be filing. Mr. Pell, I'd think hard about who runs your wash bay." She capped her pen. "And I'd think harder about who's been watching your lot honest all spring for $1 a bike." Dale finally spoke, and it was ugly and small. "It's just a lot. It's just some kid." Boone came off the wall so fast the brace nearly buckled, but it was Ray's arm across his chest that stopped him, and it was Ray's voice, low and even, that landed the blow instead. "That's the difference between you and him, Dale. He never once looked at anybody and saw just some kid." Kenner sent Dale to sit in the back of her cruiser, not cuffed, just done. Pell stayed behind, wringing his cap in his hands. And finally he crouched down in front of Zay in the rain and said, "I owe you an apology, son. And a job, if you want one legit. On the books, safe. We'll talk when the sun's up." Zay nodded, wary, hoping without letting it show. And with the tape watched and the thief in the car and the rain finally easing to a drizzle, Ray put one heavy hand on the boy's soaked shoulder and turned him toward the warm gold windows across the lot. "Come on," the president said. "Miss Dottie's been keeping a booth warm since before you were born. Let's get you fed." The bell over the diner door rang, and Miss Dottie Lane looked up from behind the counter. 62, green apron, silver curls, reading glasses on a beaded cord, and took in the whole soaked parade of them at a glance, her iron wolves, wet to the skin, and in the middle of them one small boy she had never seen inside before, only ever out on the dark lot. "Well," Dottie said. She came around the counter fast for a woman her age. "I have watched that child work my lot in the rain for 3 months and never once had him come in where it's warm. Sit, all of you, sit. Zay, honey, that booth, the one by the heater. Don't argue with me. I've buried men bigger than you for less." She put a mug of cocoa in front of him before he'd gotten his poncho off, and a plate of eggs and toast and bacon in front of him before he'd finished the cocoa. And she stood over him with her arms folded until he started eating. And only then did she let herself go back behind the counter and wipe her eyes on her apron where she thought no one could see. Ray slid into the booth across from the boy. Boone took the end. Brace stretched into the aisle. Doc pulled a chair. Tank came in last, filling the doorway, and settled 2 stools that groaned under him. The diner windows ran with rain, and outside the bikes sat dark and patient. And inside, it was warm for the first time in Zay's whole long night. "Eat first," Ray said, when the boy started to ask a question. "Talk after." So Zay ate, and it was plain to every hard man at that table that the kid was hungrier than a watched bike dollar could fix, and none of them said a word about it, and all of them saw it. And something got decided around that booth without anyone putting it into speech. When the plate was clean, Ray set his own phone on the table and turned it so Zay could see. It was Boone's handlebar camera footage, queued up. "I want you to watch 30 seconds of this," Ray said, "not to scare you. So you understand what these men saw tonight and why it matters to us." He pressed play. On the little screen, in the rain, a soaked boy stepped into a live lane, planted a flag, and stood his ground between a stranger and the trucks. Zay watched himself do it and went quiet, caught in the strange hush of a kid who never gets to see himself from the outside. "That's you," Boone said. "That's what you did. I keep it so I don't forget I owe it. Now I'm going to tell you about a debt," Ray said. And he folded his weathered hands on the table, sister's ring catching the light. "A long time ago, the man who started this club had a rule. When somebody carries one of us out of the fire and asks for nothing, we don't forget it. We don't pay it off with money. We wait until they need carrying, and then 200 of us come. You carried Boone out of the fire tonight," Ray said, "on your mother's hair tie. So now the Iron Wolves owe you a ride, Zay Booker. I don't know what road it'll be on. I don't know what night. But if there ever comes an hour when you or your mother needs to get somewhere fast and the whole world's standing between you and it, you call this diner and you say my name, and we ride." And Zay looked at the ring of scarred, bearded, rain-soaked men around the booth. And he did the arithmetic he always did, the arithmetic of a kid who'd learned that promises usually came with a catch. "What do I have to do?" he asked. "For the ride, what's it cost?" And the table went quiet because they all heard in the question every adult who'd ever charged him for kindness. "Nothing," Ray said. "That's the whole thing about it, son. It doesn't cost. You already paid. In the lane, in the rain, tonight. This is just us being the kind of people who pay back." Boone leaned in. "You gave up the thing off your own wrist for a man you never met. Let us be the club that remembers that. That's all. Let us remember it." Dottie came by with a pie tin and pretended to refill coffee so she could hover. And Doc talked quietly about the clinic at exit 41 and the sliding scale and the pharmacist he knew. And Tank, without a word, took out a worn Iron Wolves patch and set it on the table by the boy's plate, not to wear, just to hold, so the kid could feel how heavy a stitched wolf really was. It was near 2 a.m. when Ray finally drove the boy home in Dottie's old sedan, so he'd beat his mother off her shift. At the curb of a small, dark apartment, Zay stopped with his hand on the door and said, not looking back, "Nobody ever remembers me for good stuff, just when something's wrong." "We will," Ray said. "Go to bed. Don't tell her yet. We'll do this right." And the boy went in, and the club kept its promise folded up and waiting, like a debt does, until the night it came due. 6 weeks passed. The clinic at exit 41 took Renata Booker onto its sliding scale, and Doc's pharmacist cut the pill price. And for the first time in a year, the boy's tally notebook stopped being a matter of life and death. Zay still watched bikes at mile 47, but now Pell paid him on the books, and Tank came by most nights just to sit with him. And it was better. It was so much better. Then, on a Thursday in October, the sky opened worse than the night they'd met. Route 70 flooded at 3 low points before dark. The radio warned people off the roads. And Renata Booker, who could not afford to miss a shift even with the cheaper pills, went in to sit with a 90-year-old man on the far side of the county, because that was the shape of her life too. At 9:40, in a client's back bedroom, Renata's bad heart finally did the thing it had been threatening for a year. She went gray and cold and folded to the floor, and the old man she was minding pressed his medical alert button with a shaking hand, and a dispatcher 2 towns over picked up a cardiac call at the worst possible address on the worst possible night. The ambulance rolled in 90 seconds. Then it stopped. A tractor trailer had jackknifed across both lanes of Route 70 at mile 52, and the water was over the axles at mile 49, and every alternate road was either flooded or blocked behind the same wreck. Dispatch logged the delay in cold numbers. Nearest unit, 19 minutes out, and a woman in cardiac arrest does not have 19 minutes. Zay was home doing homework when the call came, not from the hospital, but from Renata's client's daughter, who had his number on the fridge for emergencies. He heard the words back bedroom and ambulance stuck in a heart, and the pencil dropped out of his hand, and for one long second, the boy who carried everything could not move at all. Then he ran. Not to the phone for a taxi he couldn't pay for, not to a neighbor. He ran 3 blocks in the pouring rain in his socks, to the only place he'd been told to run to, the diner at mile 47, with the lights still on, and he hit the door so hard the bell nearly came off its spring, and he stood there dripping and gasping and could barely get the words out. "Miss Dottie?" He grabbed the counter to stay up. "My mom, her heart. The ambulance is stuck at the wreck and they can't get to her, and they said 19 minutes and she doesn't have..." He couldn't finish it. Dottie was already moving, already reaching under the counter for the old landline, already dialing the number she knew by heart. "Where is she, baby? Tell me exactly where she is." Zay told her the address, shaking. Dottie repeated it into the phone, sharp and clear, and then she said the 5 words the whole club had been waiting 6 weeks to hear. "Ray, it's the Booker boy." A pause. "It's the ride. It's tonight." And across 10 miles of flooded highway, in a clubhouse full of iron wolves waiting out the storm, Reaper Ray Calder stood up and put on his vest. "Osa everybody up," Ray said, and 200 men and women set down their drinks. Booker's mother, cardiac. Ambulances blocked at the mile 52 wreck. We've got a debt to pay and a road to open. He looked around the room at all of them. Kenner's already rolling to run point. This is legal, this is clean. Nobody breaks a law tonight. We ride as light. We ride as the thing that gets seen. Let's go get her. Outside the clubhouse, in the driving rain, 200 engines came awake at once. It was the sound Zay had never heard in person, only imagined. The sound the whole channel of them had been built around. A wall of thunder rolling out of a storm because a boy had once given up a hair tie for a stranger and never asked for anything back. Deputy Kenner reached the diner first, lights spinning. She leaned across and threw the passenger door open. "Get in, Zay. You're riding point with me. Your mom's going to want your face when those doors open." The boy climbed in, soaked and shaking, and Kenner keyed her radio to the county channel and started clearing a lawful path through the flood. Behind the cruiser came the sound before the sight, a low rolling thunder that grew until the diner windows buzzed. And then the headlights broke through the rain at the mouth of the lot, 200 of them. Ray at the front on his big engine, Boone beside him, Tank a wall of shadow behind. They fell in behind Kenner's lights in a formation as clean as anything the storm had ever tried to stop. At mile 47, Ray pulled up level with the cruiser for just a moment, rain streaming off his beard, and he reached over and looped something small around Boone's lead handlebar where it would ride at the very front of the whole convoy. It was the hair tie. Zay's mother's hair tie, with the little brass bird, the one Zay had left with the club that first night and never asked back. So she always knows where her son is. Ray called across the gap, and Zay, in the cruiser, saw it there on the handlebar of the first bike in a river of 200, And the boy, who never cried in front of anyone, put both hands over his face and finally let it go. They ran the flood in a formation Kenner called out mile by mile. Where the water crossed the road at mile 49, the deputy's marked unit went first, and the riders followed her exact line. Single file, slow and disciplined. No heroics, no broken laws. 200 headlights turning the black water gold so every other driver on that road could see them coming and pull aside. At the mile 52 wreck, where the ambulance still sat trapped nose to trailer, Kenner's radio had already done its work. A second unit had been routed up the frontage road behind the convoy's cleared path. The wolves did not touch the wreck, did not block a lane, did not so much as raise a voice. They lined the frontage road on both sides, headlights on, and turned a flooded death trap into a lit runway. The paramedics reached Renata Booker at the 11-minute mark, not the 19, because 200 motorcycles and one deputy had opened 8 minutes of road out of a night that had none to spare. They got her breathing. They got her on the gurney. And when the ambulance finally rolled, it rolled down a corridor of iron wolves standing in the rain with their lights on, escorting a stranger's mother like she was the most important person alive. Because to the boy in the cruiser, she was. Mercy General's emergency doors slid open at 10:40 to a sight the night staff would talk about for years. An ambulance, a sheriff's cruiser, and behind them, a parking lot filling up with rain-soaked bikers, engine after engine after engine, all of them killing their motors at once, so that the only sound left as the gurney went through the doors was rain and one boy's ragged breathing. Zay tried to follow the gurney in, and a nurse caught him gently, and it was Boone who limped up on his brace and knelt down and held the boy by both shoulders. She's inside. They've got her. That's the best hands in the county, and you got her here. You hear me? 19 minutes said she wouldn't make it. You made it 11. You did that. You and your mother's hair tie. Again, they waited 3 hours in the Mercy General lobby, and they did not leave. 200 of them, too many for the room, spilling out under the awning and into the rain. A whole club standing vigil for a woman most of them had never met. Dottie arrived with urns of coffee. Doc talked his way back to the cardiac floor and talked his way out again with news. Tank sat next to Zay and let the boy fall asleep against his enormous arm. At 1 a.m, a doctor came out looking for the family of Renata Booker and stopped because the family of Renata Booker turned out to be 200 people in leather who all stood up at once. She's stable, the doctor said. Into a silence you could have heard a pin drop through. The next few days matter, but she's stable. Whoever got her here that fast, you saved her life. And the room did not cheer. It exhaled altogether, like one tired animal that had been holding its breath for hours. They woke Zay to tell him. Boone did it. Crouched down, quiet. Your mom's okay. She's going to be okay. The boy blinked up out of sleep and understood, and turned and pressed his face into Tank's leather vest. And the biggest, hardest man in the Iron Wolves put one scarred hand on the back of the boy's head and held him there, and when his voice came out, it cracked clean in two. We got you, kid. We got you now. Renata Booker came home 11 days later to an apartment that did not look like the one she'd left. The Iron Wolves had been through it, not to take, but to fix. A new heater that worked, a full pantry, a repaired front lock, and on the kitchen table, in a plain envelope, a clinic card paid a year ahead, so that never again would her boy do the math of her heart in a notebook on a dark lot. She learned all of it slowly, in pieces, as a mother learns what her child has been carrying alone. She learned about the bikes and the dollars and the hair tie and the man in the live lane. She sat at that table with her son and cried. not for the fear of it, but because a boy had loved her that hard in secret for a year, and because 100 strangers had answered when he finally called. "You should have told me," she said, holding his face. "You'd have worried," Zay said. "Worrying's bad for your heart." And Renata laughed through the tears, because it was her own line, come back to her out of her own son's mouth. And she pulled him in and held him and said, "My worrying is my job, baby, not yours. Never yours again." The lot at mile 47 got a new sign that spring, painted by Dottie's nephew, sanctioned by Pell and the county both. "Wolf Watch," it read, and under it, in smaller letters, "Secure bike parking, attendant on duty." Zay was the attendant. On the books, fair wage, safe hours, a warm booth 20 feet away, and a whole club that came through nightly to make sure the light stayed on. Dale Rooker was gone by then, his concession pulled, a misdemeanor on his record for the tip jar and the false report. Nobody at mile 47 said his name much. The boy he'd called a thief had a job with his name on it now, and a mother getting stronger, and 200 people who would cross a flooded county in the dark for him. And that was the only answer to Dale that ever needed giving. Boone's bike got a real master link the very next morning, of course. But he never took the hair tie off the handlebar. It rode there still, faded lavender and one small brass bird, at the front of every ride. And when new prospects asked the road captain what it was, he'd tell them the whole story, start to finish, mile 47 and the live lane, and the boy who gave up the thing off his own wrist. That, Boone would say, is what the patch is supposed to mean. Renata wears her matching one to this day, the twin, so she always knows where her son is. But she doesn't lean on it like she used to, because these days she knows exactly where he is. He's at mile 47, under a sign that bears the club's name, doing the honest work he taught himself in the dark, surrounded by the family that a single act of kindness in the rain built around one 11-year-old boy. On the night Renata came home, the whole club rode her and Zay out to Dottie's for pie. And afterward, when it was time to go, Ray put the boy up on the back of his own bike, and Zay rode home in a convoy of 200 engines and thunder, his mother's hair tie riding point at the front of it all. And he understood at last that the ride he'd been owed was never really about one bad night. It was about never being alone on the road again. Miss Dottie stood in her doorway and watched the taillights string out down Route 70. The light on, the coffee hot, the road open for family. And she said what she always said to the empty lot after they'd gone. "Come back safe, all of you. Come back safe." And every last one of them did, somewhere out on the wet highway, at the front of a river of headlights. A small brass bird caught the light and held it, the way kindness does, passing hand to hand down a dark road, refusing to fade.